Stand up, everybody.
Oh, yeah. This is worse than a wedding.
Sing them back here.
They don't want us.
There we go.
Oh, that's okay. I don't think I have either.
All right, perfect. 3, 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up, we've got a recognition. And Dr. Jackson?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, board members. I'm extremely excited to have the opportunity to recognize one of our students for what we believe is actually historic recognition, which is saying something in our school system because the school system has been so successful over the years. The school system, like all school systems across the state, have the opportunity to nominate students for the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. The U.S. Presidential Scholars Program was established by President Lyndon Johnson in 1964, and since that time, the program has honored over 8,000 outstanding high school seniors across the nation. The mission of the program is to recognize and honor outstanding high school seniors and thereby encourage high school attainment among all students. Since the program started, our school system has nominated students, and for the first time, one of our students has been selected as a state nominee and has now been nominated by the state of North Carolina as our representative to the opportunity to be awarded the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. And so at this time, I'd like to recognize Principal Corey Johnson to introduce us to a fine young man. Mr. Johnson?
Good afternoon. It seems like just a couple of weeks ago that we were here to honor Juan Lar Torres for his nomination to be Carteret County Public Schools nominee for the U.S. Scholars Award Program. Tonight, though, we'll get to honor him for the next step. As Dr. Jackson mentioned, he's one of 20 students across the state of North Carolina who have received this award. One of the things that I have in the last 18 months that I've been at school with Juan, one of the things I've quickly figured out, he's one of the hardest working students in our building. And not only that, but what's very admirable is the fact that he's always looking for the next hardest class. Can I take another calculus, Mr. Johnson? Okay, and I don't understand that. But Juan is one of those guys that really wants to go out and get the most out of his education, and I greatly appreciate that. So I think, Juan, if you'll come on up. This is Juan Lar Torres. Again, he is one of 20 representing the state of North Carolina, and we can't be more proud of him.
Here we go.
Congratulations. You can have a picture. It is your fault.
Congratulations, Juan. That work ethic will take you a long way.
Or anywhere.
Just like that.
All right, moving right along, we are now looking for a consideration of approval of the meeting agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the agenda to add an item 5.3 to receive a presentation on school system EVOS data from Jody McClenny, Chief Academic Officer.
I have a motion to amend the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. Now,
I'll make the motion to approve the meeting agenda as amended.
perfect. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Chadwick has seconded that. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. The meeting agenda has been approved. Now we have public forum. I've got one public comment, and I am going to read this long statement here. It is now time for public comment. Anyone present tonight wishing to make comment should have filled out a request to speak public comment form. To ensure civility, relevance, and time management, there are specific requirements for public comment set forth in school board policy. They include comments are limited to matters pertaining to public education. The speaker shall state his or her name at the beginning of his or her comment. Speaking time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. A 3-minute timer will appear on the TV screens in the bottom corner. The timer will beep when there are 30 seconds remaining. It will then beep a final time when your time is up. For civility and decorum, no speaker shall make obscene remarks or issue personal attacks or insults. No complaint against a school employee or a student will be permitted, although this may be heard in closed session at a later date following consultation with the superintendent. Much information about individual students, including a speaker's own child, is confidential under state and federal law, and we discourage and often prohibit such information in open session. The chairperson may immediately terminate any comments that violate these rules, and board members will not respond to questions except occasionally to request clarification. With that introduction, our first and only speaker tonight is Mr. Roger Eaton.
Good evening. My name is Roger Eaton. I live in Morehead City, and I have a student at West Carteret High School. I come tonight to request from you some items for your budget requests from the county. And I would request that you ask for everything. Everything that it takes to run this school system at 100%. Will you get it? No. But you should request it. Every pencil, every pen, every piece of paper, every piece of construction paper, bulletin board, desk, blackboard, chalk, everything that it takes to operate a classroom, from tissues to toiletries. You should request everything. Every schoolroom that needs to be repainted, every piece of furniture, desk, chair, anything to make the buildings better, safer, should be requested. I ask that you request every upgrade to the facilities, every piece of athletic equipment, every piece of band equipment that the county needs, every after-school program that we currently fund, and any program that you would like to fund. The nutritional needs of our students, that all meals be paid for at all schools in the county, and that we find a way to send food home with students who are in need over the weekends. Again, anything that it takes to run the school system at 100%. Teachers' pay, I would ask that you request the state's highest supplemental for our teachers, that you request school nurses, school counselors that it takes to run our school system at its optimum efficiency. Teachers' aides, those that we currently have, those that we used to have, in the positions that we need funded now. I ask that you request for all of it. And I do ask this for two reasons. One is we need an honest accounting of what it takes to run our school system at 100%. Yes, some of them are wishes versus wants and needs, but that's fine. We should add wishes to the list as well, so that everyone in the county, student, teacher, parent, and this board knows where we stand in funding that, whether it be 60%, or 95%, let's at least make a list of our needs, wants, and wishes so that we know where we stand. And secondly, and more important, during the next budget year, there invariably is going to be a need, something arise, you're going to have to request additional funding. And the wise ones over at the courthouse, someone's going to say, well, the school system has plenty of money. You just need to do a better job of budgeting it. And at that point in time, I want you to be able to pull out the list of 300 items that aren't being funded and remind them that if you had any additional cash, it would already be spent.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton, we appreciate it. Next up is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Reverend Goodwin has made a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Statler has seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. Next up, I've got Ms. Allison Dees.
Good evening, and happy CTE month. Today's February 1st, so that means it's the beginning of CTE month. So I'm Allison Dees, I'm the CTE director, and I'm here tonight to celebrate Career and Technical Education Month. And with me, I have the CTE support. I have Karen Davis, Kelly Hoff, and Kathy Bernstein. I also have with me tonight, the board meal was provided by the CTE students culinary students and culinary teachers, Miss Jessica Lewis from West Carteret High School, Miss Robin Stafford, East Croatan High School, and Miss Karen Millis from East Carteret High School. Their culinary students provided the meals tonight.
Thank you for dinner.
Thank you.
Also, if there are any CTE teachers around, and I think there are, if they will stand as well. And I am here tonight to highlight the program improvements, the student activities, and the community events that the CTE has been a part of for the last year. Oh, it's awake. In the school year 2020-21, we opened our first Paxson Patterson College and Career Ready Labs at Broad Creek Middle and Down East Middle. These labs were a huge hit with the middle school students. We added more labs to Newport Middle and Moorhead Middle. The learning labs engage students with problem-based, real-world technology that empowers students to discover their interests and aptitudes. We also added an additional lab at Broad Creek this past year, making that 2 college and career ready labs. Along with having a Paxson Patterson College and Career Ready Lab at Down East Middle, we also offer a supplemental program in boat building for the students of the Down East community. Listening to many contractors in our region, we decided to expand the Trade and Industry program at West Carteret to include masonry. This is an inherently honors course, and its prerequisite is construction core. We met with Ryan Shaver, he's the Workforce Development and Training Coordinator for the North Carolina Masonries Association, Contractors Association, in the spring of 2021. And he was able to connect Mr. Leidecker, who's here with us tonight, to instructors in North Carolina, and also set him up to do an externship this past summer at Camp Lejeune. Starting in school year 22-23, we will be able to offer a local course option. The course name is BOAT, Building on a Tradition. The local industry partners work with CTE instructor and support staff to develop standards that align to their current employment needs. The partnership has been a true collective effort. Another partnership initiative starting in spring of 22 is Spark. The purpose is to grow our Carteret County pipeline to address healthcare shortages. Students can choose from various departments to work in. Currently, we have 9 interns, 4 from East, 4 from Croatan, and 1 from West. CTE is proud of the continued support of our CTE internship program. This year, we currently have approximately 78 student interns in various locations throughout Carteret County. These are just a few of the partnerships you see that we've had this year. CTE students have participated in several community events throughout the year. Students worked the inaugural CCPS Foundation Gala held at 34 North in Beaufort last year. Student clubs, groups participated in the annual Cookie War event in December. Culinary students had the opportunity to participate in another CCPS Foundation event hosted by the Beaufort Wine and Food. Here you can see Miss Lewis instructing her students on proper technique for serving. CTE partnered with Carteret County Economic Development and NC Works to offer students a summer job fair during the day and community event in the late afternoon. This event will continue this April. CTE was excited after a year off that we could continue to offer our premier CTE camp, CASH. For rising 6th through 8th grade students had the opportunity to experience hands-on learning in a fun environment. The areas we focus on are in culinary, agriculture, construction, and health science. Class took a new look this year. The focus was providing students with hands-on employability skills needed to be successful in the workforce. Students developed resumes, practiced their interview skills, toured CCC to learn about post-secondary education opportunities, and completed 3 days of job shadowing in a career field of their choice. The CTE support staff worked diligently to align their job shadowing with their career goals. CTE student activities, either in the classroom or through CTSOs, career and technical student organizations, have picked up momentum. FBLA held their regional competition this fall. West Carteret's DECA have been putting together teacher appreciation videos, and of course you see other student activities. This past fall, FFA students from all 3 high schools attended the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was a week-long learning experience that provided students the opportunity to meet like students from across the country, as well as learning about agriculture industry and also college options in agriculture. CTE has also started the Cte Spark Newsletter that comes out quarterly. This publication allows our parents and community members to continue to be informed about CTE happenings. If you would like to join the mailing list, here is a QR code. A special edition for CTE month will come out at the end of February. These are just a few of the upcoming events we have already planned for the remainder of the school year. And again, thank you for your continued support of the vocational programs that enhance the opportunity for CTE to meet the needs of our college and career-bound students, as well as the technical workforce. Happy CTE month.
Thank you, Ms. Days.
CTE month.
Hey, real quick, if you don't mind, I'd like for your students to stand up. I know some of them have introduced themselves, but we'd like to get all their names.
All right.
I know that's a lot to ask, but I know y'all can do that.
So just your name, what year you are, what school you are?
I'm Demi. I'm in 11th grade from East Carteret.
I'm Sarah. I am in 11th grade from Groveton High School.
I'm Tyler. I'm a 10th grader at Groveton High School.
I'm Jacob. I'm a 10th grader at Groveton High School.
I'm Katie. I'm a 10th grader at Groveton High School.
I'm Mary. I'm a junior and I'm from Carteret.
I'm Kayla. I'm a 10th grader at Proficiency Chart.
I'm Hunter. I'm a 9th grader from Groveton High School.
I'm Sarah. I'm a 10th grader from East Carteret High School.
I'm Larrington, a 10th grader from East Carteret.
Thank y'all so much.
Thanks for being here.
Where are all the West Carteret people? Just asking.
I wanted to attend, but she had to dip out for a second.
Okay, just making sure. Just making sure.
He's a little sensitive.
See this right here, but West Carteret, I'm not partial or anything. Okay, next up, we've got Mr. Blair Probst.
Good evening, Board.
Evening.
Tonight, I have second read policies in front of you. These policies come from the North Carolina School Board Association Fall 2021 Update Packet. Many of these revisions reflect the minor edits to existing policies, as well as modifications in state board policy and changes in federal and state legislation. There were no changes to the first read, so I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have about these policies.
Any questions?
Fantastic.
All right. Well,
Great.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the policies as presented.
we have a motion to approve the policy as presented.
I will second.
Ms. Wheatley has seconded this. All in favor, raise your right hand.
I appreciate it.
Very good.
There were no first read policies. I'll be sure to double up next week.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have the all-exciting school calendar with Dr. Drake.
We have Jody.
Oh,
Jody.
my bad. My bad.
5.3.
5.3.
Oh,
Even more exciting.
my bad.
Good evening, board members. Thank you so much. About 11 days ago, we received word that we had growth data in a system, and so tonight we're going to give you a bird's eye district view of where we are with our growth data, but more importantly, where we're going to be going after reviewing this data. So let me just give you a quick update and make sure we all understand what EVOS is. EVOS is a software system that we use as educators that's provided to all of North Carolina that gives us tools to analyze and improve student learning and for teachers to reflect on their effectiveness. We are able to examine and look at the impact of teachers, schools, the district, and also specific grade levels, specific courses, as well as specific subjects. Now, I do want to say this, EVOS does not measure proficiency. EVOS is strictly a growth measure that is based on a student's historical academic profile, okay? And it's important to note that EVOS is just one source of data that we use when we evaluate student progress and effectiveness within our schools. Mike? There we go. So, it's important to note, too, that EVOS has been in the past part of our accountability system, but North Carolina received a waiver so that we do not have that accountability aspect being reported in 2021. EVOS was released to us so that we can use it from an internal standpoint and make instructional decisions. But I also want to note that it's important when we're analyzing this data that we're careful to know that we can't make a complete comparison from last year to previous years for obvious reasons with the various circumstances that we've had since March of 2020. So we are going to be looking at this strictly for instructional purposes. So you ready to dive in? Here we go. There we go. All right. So what we've done, we've broken down the data by subject, reading, math, and science, and in grade span. So we're going to start with kindergarten through second grade. If you'll take a look at the graph, the stack column chart on the left is Carteret County Public Schools teacher effectiveness, and on the right is what is reported for North Carolina. So for reading in grades K through 2, we had 100% of our elementary schools meet or exceed growth in reading, and 97.8% of our K2 teachers met or exceeded growth. I do want to point out that is amazing work. And also, I put the proficiency score because we know that we took a hit with proficiency since March of 2020. However, when you have growth scores like that, we're on the road to gaining those scores back to what we're accustomed to. So that was K2 reading. If you look at 3, 4, 5, again, on the left, you'll see Carteret County Public Schools. We had 100% of our teachers in grades 3 through 5 meet or exceed reading growth on that. In addition, I do want to point out that in grades 3 through 5, we had all of our student groups exceed or meet growth as well. And to give you an idea of how many different student groups are reported in grades 3 through 5, we had 24 different groups reported, so all 24 groups in reading in 3, 4, 5 made their growth.
And do you mind if I interrupt real quick? I'm curious, Jody. First of all, growth is by far, in my opinion, the most important metric. So that is awesome to see. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we don't get the schools don't get enough credit for their wonderful growth.
Right.
But I know we took a big hit. What has proficiency typically been in previous years? I mean, like the 57 and the other. What have we typically been at? Do you know?
Typically, I believe we've been in the mid-70s with that, or it's fluctuated in those 70s range for that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Didn't the proficiency chart come out earlier? Did we see it earlier and where we were still way above
Correct.
most of the state in
Correct.
proficiency,
Yes.
even though it looks low?
Correct. Mm-hmm. All right, grades 6 through 8 reading data, our proficiency, which came out in September, was 62%. But if you look at Carteret County Public School now, we had 97% of our teachers meet or exceed growth in that area as well. And 97% of our student groups in grades 6 through 8 met growth. And there were 29 reported student groups in grades 6 through 8. Moving on, we're going to stick with reading and look at English 2. English 2 for the district, our proficiency was 71.7. We had 100% of our schools meet or exceed growth. 93% of our EOC teachers in English 2 met or exceeded growth. And all of our student groups in that course, there were 9 reported for English 2, that all of those groups met and exceeded growth in that as well. Phenomenal. Any questions on the reading data so far? All right, let's move on to math. So let's talk about math for a second. You'll see at the top it says grades 3, 4, and 5, and 5 is underlined and bolded. Because we did not have data last year, we only have growth scores for grade 5. I included grade 3, 4, and 5 in this slide because the proficiency for all three grades was 61%. And in addition, even though we only have growth scores for 5th grade, we cannot take lightly that they had 4th grade teachers that worked really, really hard to get them as there as well. And so when you look at that, we had 87% of our teachers in grades 5 meet or exceed growth in math, and 100% of our students met their growth. Student groups met their growth in math, and we reported 8 groups because we only had grade 5 reported. Again, ahead of the state average on that. When we look at math data for grades 6, 7, and 8, proficiency in that was 51%. However, if you take a look at that stacked column graph right there, we had 97% of our middle school teachers in math meet or exceed growth compared to the state average on the right, and 100% of our student groups met or exceeded growth in that as well. There were 29 student groups reported for those grades. So all 29 groups met or exceeded growth in that. Moving into Math 1. And of course, Math 1, we had a proficiency of 50%. However, I do want you to take a look at that stacked bar graph there. 100% of our Math 1 teachers met or exceeded growth. 100% of our student groups in Math 1 met or exceeded growth. Again, we had 8 student groups reported in that. That is phenomenal. And Math 3 reported as well in EVAS. We were 63.2% proficient there, but if you take a look, we had 90% of our Math 3 teachers meet or exceed growth. For Math 3, EVAS does not report student group data on that one, because it has typically not been included in the accountability measure. It's only been Math 1 that's been in that. So let's shift gears just real quick and talk about science. So 5th grade science, we had a proficiency score of 72.1% for the district. If you take a look at that left chart, 100% of our teachers met or exceeded growth in science in comparison to North Carolina 5th grade teachers. Again, all of our student groups met or exceeded growth in that as well. 8th grade, we had a proficiency score of 82.1. 75% of our teachers met or exceeded growth, and all of our student groups met or exceeded growth on that. Phenomenal. And last, science, we had our biology, and of course, 64.8% proficient. If you take a look at the left side, we had 100% of our biology teachers exceed or meet growth as comparison to what it was across the state. And again, we do not have student group data reported in biology. And CTE, I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to talk about you for a little bit. So our CTE across the district, all of those courses, we were 86% proficient in that. 86% proficient. 100%, I'm glad we have CTE teachers here. 100% of our CTE teachers met or exceeded growth. And EVAS does not break down CTE student groups. However, we do have student group proficiency, and I will say they are averaging almost 20 percentage points higher than the region of how they're performing. So our CTE group, amazing work. So thank you, CTE folks. So let's go back and look for a little bit, if we will, for over the last few years of how we have performed. Back in 2015, 2016, we had 11 schools meet or exceed growth. We had 5 that did not. Moving to the right of that, you can see each year we got better. The next year, 16, 17, 12 met, 4 did not. 17, 18, 13 met, 3 did not. 2018, we had this little thing called Florence come along and derail us for a little bit, but it did not derail the growth that we made. We had 15 schools meet or exceed growth, 2 that did not. That big line there is kind of a, let's stop. We had a little thing called a pandemic come. Again, that did not derail what our teachers and our staff and our community were able to accomplish in that. And I am incredibly proud to report 17, all of our schools, met or exceeded growth with 0 not. in spite of everything that was thrown at them, they continued to focus on what mattered, and that was making sure that we provided an education that was worthy for our students. So congratulations to everyone.
Jody, do they keep track of the growth data for 2019, 2020?
There is no growth date. We did not, yeah. There is not.
That year just.
We didn't test that year.
Yeah.
So you may have seen this floating around social media, but it is worthy to put up again. 100% of our schools met growth, 98% of our students met or exceeded in reading, 100% in math, 100% in science, and 97% of our teachers met or exceeded growth. Phenomenal. So what do we do now? We've got this. We are going to celebrate that. We should celebrate that every chance that we get. But it's important from a district level, at a school level, as well as in the individual teacher level, that we ask these three questions. Where are we now? What have we learned? And where do we go from here? And so I want to talk for just 1 second about our focus from a district standpoint. Historically, what we've done when students haven't performed at a proficient level, we've really focused on remediation, meaning right where they're at and targeting those skills. Well, what research has shown that when you do that over time, you actually have a wider gap in what students can do. And so we're going to flip it and look through the lens of acceleration. And so let's talk about what acceleration is going to look like.
Jody, will you repeat that one more time? What you just said, if you remediate, it actually slows down.
Absolutely. So research has shown that when we remediate, which is we're going to take students wherever they are at, and we pull them out to target on specific skills, that they will actually, the gap will widen as they go through their K-12 because they're not getting the supports with their grade level curriculum. So there is an approach where you flip it and you think of acceleration. Now, acceleration does not mean that we're going to teach up here and not give you what you need. It means we're going to teach grade level content, but we're going to use practices and strategies where we'll pull you up to that and support you in that so that you have access, equitable access to that grade level content.
Well, it's a paradigm shift to what we've been doing, yeah.
That's not going to say that some students don't need remediation, but when you have more than 20% of your students that are not proficient, you don't have the human capital to be able to provide the remediation in the manner that it would need to be for students to succeed. So we've got to flip and think about how we're doing it. So let's talk about it for just real quick. We're going to keep students moving forward on their grade level trajectory. What that means is we're going to be focusing on what must be learned in that grade level or that content. We're going to look at research-based strategies and educational practices that will impact the learning for all. So when we say that, we talk a lot about core instruction. You've probably heard me throw it around. But what that just means is that everybody that's in every class should have access to high-quality instruction that's going to guarantee we accelerate growth. And we know that research tells us those practices that we can put into place. So we're going to focus on preparing students for the success with the new learning that they're faced and lay the foundation for continued growth. Research shows us that 40% sometimes of what we teach in our classrooms, students already know. So when we know we have this gap, we need to make sure we're teaching the things that are going to accelerate that growth and really maximize our time. So when we think about accelerated student learning, we're going to look at improving student engagement. How do we engage them in the learning process? How do we provide access for teachers to have rigorous grade level material and assignments? How do we identify the crucial gaps? What I mean by that is not to say everything that we teach is important, but it is. But we do know there are certain things that are going to be mandatory for students to know now for their future in their next grade or their next content, really focusing on those areas. So we're going to identify critical content, key skills, knowledge that teachers need to teach, and we're going to support them in that. And we're going to help every student close that gap and demonstrate grade level skills. So that's a lot of talk. You're saying, Jody, how's it going to happen? Well, we're going to narrow that down and really focus on a few things with acceleration. When we rebuild educator and student agency, we want to make students help identify and rebuild those connections with learning. We know they were impacted with being out of school. So how can we rebuild that and help them understand that what they do matters in school and the effort they put in? We're going to also help rebuild educator agency with that. I will tell you, when you have growth scores that we just talked about, that helps a lot with agency, because agency is, did what I do matter? Did it make a difference? And man, we're seeing that what teachers have done have made a difference. We're going to focus on curriculum and instruction. I want us to think about curriculum. What are we teaching? Making sure we have the things that teachers need. And instruction, what are those practices that we're going to put into place? They're going to guarantee we get the biggest bang for our buck from an instructional standpoint. And assessment, recovering learning through assessment. Assessment gets a bad rap, but we're really going to look at assessment as a tool, not a stop and test, as a tool to make sure we are informed on how we're delivering instruction with that. Recovering learning through supportive systems, we've got to make sure that we look at the practices and the supports we have in schools to support the mental health of students, the social emotional learning as well as the academic, and maybe how do we need to redirect some of the things that we're doing to make sure they're met. And mobilize intervention efforts. We know that not every kid is going to be, acceleration is going to work for. So we have to make sure that we have those supports in place through intervention for remediation, but targeted, specific, and make sure that we can track how they're growing and continue to push them. So that's a lot of talk right there, but it really is making sure that we target and have intention with what we do so that we open up opportunities for our students. And I want to end with just this last quote. Carteret County Public Schools has been known for excellence, and we will continue to be known for excellence. But excellence has never been an accident. Hope is not a strategy, right? And so we want to make sure that excellence is not an accident. It's a result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, skillful execution, and the vision to see that the obstacles we have are truly just opportunities for us to get even better. And so I'm excited for the future. Any questions or?
With the good growth numbers that you had, do you have any idea how quickly we may approach the proficiency numbers that we're used to?
No, and I'm going to tell you why no. Because every growth is based on the average in the state of North Carolina, right? And every system had a different approach. So I don't know how reliable it is to look at how long it'll take us to get there with that. But what I do know is research tells us, I always go back to research, that when you are coming out of something where you've seen a significant dip in proficiency, that you can expect 3 to 5 years. Now, with accelerated growth and exceeding, I would be surprised if it takes 3 years. I think we can get there quicker.
I just want to say I appreciate
Thanks.
you, and I know it's a team effort for the cabinet and all of the principals, but really switching the paradigm in the field of our schools. We know these losses happened. We can't go back and change them, but flipping where we're not looking at those gaps, but looking at just moving everyone forward together feels like a really positive shift for us.
Absolutely.
And it's so impressive to me that we are coming, I don't want to say we're coming out of, but we are coming out of
Yes, we are.
a pandemic, and that every single one of our schools, I mean, in roadblock after roadblock, kids are out of schools, teachers are out of schools, and somehow we're still bridging the gap and moving kids forward, and that is so impressive to me.
And that is a direct reflection of every single adult that works with our system, whether you are an assistant, a bus driver, a teacher, every person has that same vision and direction. That's what's going to see us through.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Absolutely. And
Every one
Jody,
of you.
I'll just say I love the quote, because when I look around the room, it epitomizes the employees that we have, and we should put that on everybody's classroom door, office door, because it does sum up, the professionals that we have. So
Absolutely.
thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to say this, I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I'm absolutely proud to have both of my children in the Carteret County school system. So thank you to all the teachers and staff and administrators and you students for just doing what you do. It warms my heart when Jody McClenny gets up here and gets me all fired up. So
Surprise.
sometimes I cry, but I do that. Anyway. All right, now it's Dr. Jackson's turn.
Calendar.
He cleared the room out.
Calendar.
Man, he brought it down.
Mike, okay.
Mr. McKay, this is, sorry about that. With the calendar.
Good evening, Board.
Room out.
Right.
Thank you for allowing us to bring forth a calendar to you, just to kind of review some of those requirements. These do come out of general statute. So as we do this, we do share this with each one of our schools, and we'll go through that process that we went through to build our calendar, because you'll see this coming year is a bit of a challenge year, and I'll explain to you a little bit more about that. Really, this one start bullet and start requirement is the reason for a challenge, to get our high schools where you can have the maximum number of days in a fall semester, hopefully before Christmas break. Our students and our teachers and our staff really saw the benefit of that this year, and looking forward to it for the coming year, but you'll see that in just a moment. End date no later than the Friday closest to June 11th. Again, makes it very tight for that, looking at that. Covers at least 9 calendar months, and must have a minimum of 185 days or 1,025 hours. Well, if you look at the calendar that's before you there is no way to get 185 days between August the 29th, where we have to start, and June the 9th, when you look at that. But we'll look at that in just a little bit. We'll be looking at the hours, and we'll have more than enough hours to cover that. Must have at least 9 teacher workdays, a minimum of 2 workdays where the teachers may use accumulative vacation leave, a minimum of 10 annual leave or vacation leave days, and the same or equivalent number of legal holidays as set forth by the State Personnel Commission for state employees. While we're in school, that is 11. There is a 12th, but that's the 4th of July when we're normally not in school. Only other 2, Sunday shall not be a school day, never has been in Carteret County, and Veterans Day shall be a holiday given on Veterans Day if we are in school for that. The calendar development process, there's a presentation, the one you're seeing here, as well as an explanation video that I go through going through this, and that's not to take anything away from a principal. It just makes sure that every staff member, for almost the 1,200 that we have, from White Oak to Atlantic, hear the same thing as far as what are the requirements for calendar. We put forth typically a draft or 2 drafts just to kind of give an idea of what we're looking at. This year, draft 1 was a semester break in December, so when you come back in January, you were starting 2nd semester specifically for high school. Draft 2 looked more to where we were previously to the past 2 years, where we actually had a semester break in mid-January. Principals share with their school leadership team the video or the presentation, and then also share with their parent advisory councils. The leadership team representatives then take that back to the staff that they represent, get feedback from that. We don't have a lot of work days and things already placed in there. They tell us where they want those. They tell us where they want early release days. They're not in our drafts. Those are placed upon their recommendation. They bring back those recommendations to the school leadership team. Principal then submits that feedback from parents and from staff. Then that is compiled. I compile that and then bring that to our cabinet meeting, and we look at those things and fit as many of those suggestions as we can into the calendar. And then tonight, the draft is brought forward to you after that process that gets everybody's input. So if you look at the drafts that are in front of you, the first one we'll look at is the PK-12, and just look at the top for that. And just looking down the side, I've just put the requirements there all in one place so you can kind of see that. Start date no earlier than the Monday closest to August the 26th. You'll see for this year, that Monday is the 29th of August. We lose almost a whole week in there because of where the 26th falls. The end date no later than the Friday closest to June 11th. Going all the way up to June, but June the 9th is the latest day we can go. A total of days in the calendar of 215. That's from the very first day teachers walk in the building on a work day to the last day when they walk out. That's a teacher contract, is 215 days. Both of these calendars have 215 days in them. And then teacher work days, there are 11 that you'll see throughout the calendar. We'll kind of go through the calendar in just a moment. Annual vacation or leave days, those are 10. Holidays, 11. There's no school on Sunday, and there is Veterans Day on November 11th. The 185 days or 1,025 hours. At minimum next year, we'll have 1,050 hours at any given school. Many of our schools more than that. Kind of working our way through this, You'll see the 22nd there of August, that's a school mandatory day. That gives schools that opportunity to meet their staff, anything that principal needs to do, staff development they may want in their building, that's principal's protected time with their staff. 23rd, 24th, district-wide PD days. Moving right along, September, you see the Labor Day holiday there. October the 10th, Columbus Day. That is a mandatory workday, district PD again. But we also stacked it on top of Columbus Day intentionally, because actually a week down may work better for us. It would give us a little bit more of a span in there, but we wanted to give as much childcare possible. So if they're a federal employee, they already have Columbus Day off, so it's already built in for them there. That's the reason we placed it there. Look at November 11th, Veterans Day, early release there before Thanksgiving. Getting to December, that's where it looks very different. Originally, draft one stopped at December the 16th, and we started the traditional 2 full weeks of Christmas break. When our high schools looked at that, they said, we'd love to have 90 days. We had 77 this year, no, a little bit more than that, and go back to 75. That worries us a bit. So they took it back, their staff suggestions were, let's crouch into that next week a little bit. And the thing that we did was kind of shift that, so it would go all the way up to the 22nd. That would be the week of exams. And that would be an early release day for all schools on the 22nd.
So solely just to give first semester more days?
Yes.
Because we're already 79 versus 98.
Exactly. To get them as balanced as we could and still get that break, that clean break in December, so when we come back in January, we're starting a fresh semester.
The high schools plan their classes around ones that could handle maybe a shorter versus longer. I guess they get creative there.
They do, but that's also a conversation we've already had with them in our last principals meeting, looking at those honors classes, honor sections that you can possibly push into the fall that may not need as much time, that can move at a little bit faster pace, still get the curriculum covered. Absolutely, those are discussions that we've had with them. And looking at the high schools when they brought this back, I'm going to be honest, when they left here, I wasn't really sure where they were going to be. Were they going to say, yes, we still want this, or no, we can't do this, let's get it back? 100% of our high schools voted for the unbalanced semester, if we could push into that week before Christmas. We took those annual leave days, and you'll see we placed those at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th in January. We would like to place the 6th as one of those days as well. However, if you do that, you move to 11 annual leave or vacation days. That means a new teacher in our system gets about 10.7 days accumulated throughout the year. That means that new teacher for the first about 5 years of their career would not have any leave to take off. So we push that back to be a work day there on the 6th. Employees that have the leave certainly can choose to take that off and have that continuous 2 weeks of leave during that time. The 9th and 10th there, again, switch over time for high schools, but also district-wide PD when we look at that. Martin Luther King there in the middle of January. And then we carefully placed those work days February 20th, President's Day, again, stacked on top of federal holiday, and then March the 17th. That comes right at the end of a grading period, and that also took one from the end of the year and moved it there because principals and staff said, we need something from that February day before spring break, get us to there. I want you to look at March 1st for just a moment, because that's a little bit of a strange day in the calendar. Calendar law says we cannot count hours of instruction or days for remote learning unless it's for weather or for COVID-related events. But looking at the suggestions and the ask from our schools, not only elementary, and looking at letters training they're going to have to do next year, which is a very extensive training mandated by the state. They will have some full days they will have to do that, and also some early release days that they're going to need to be working on that. This would give them that day to finish that last unit up for that. As well, for our high schools, that would give them a day to give the ACT without anybody else in the building. So that is their ask. When we did that, And we could make it a teacher workday and say juniors come to school, but we thought that was a little awkward, so we left it as remote learning. And everybody would still be learning those days as well. Spring break, you're looking there, traditional week, May, Memorial Day, ending up June 9th with the early release day. Also wanted to say 60% of our middle schools and 90% of our elementary schools, even though this probably, the semester doesn't have as much impact on them, they still were in favor of the imbalanced semester to look at breaking before Christmas break. Questions about this calendar?
Does the state only require one remote day?
They do not require any remote days going forward. This was the last year that they required that, and truthfully, we cannot add them to the calendar and count them for instruction hours unless they're for the weather or COVID events.
Well, I think it's amazing what our staff did 2 years, well, for Florence, and then the pandemic switching over. So I do think it's important to maintain a remote platform, although I hate the idea of long-term, but I think it's important to have it, so.
And Mike, I know it changes from year to year. How is our calendar looking like next year as far as we're going to be better off with trying to get more days in that first semester?
You're talking about 23, 24?
Yeah, in general, I'm curious about the pattern here. We've been working on the state for a while, and they're not budging on it.
So you roll through about a 7-year cycle with a calendar. And the best you can do is hit a Wednesday to be able to go back to that Monday, get you a little bit closer. Thursday, you can kind of skirt it. It's, depending on the way that you look at that. The other thing we have to be careful of with that is we don't want to violate general statute. That is not a DPI recommendation. That's actually a general statute for us, because we did go back and look at that. Is there any way for us to start that week before? And that would just be a flat-out violation of general statute.
If I may, Mr. McKay, so Mr. McKay referenced the 7-year cycle. 22-23 is the worst of the 7 years, and so every 7 years we get the worst, which is the latest possible.
That's what I was kind of kidding.
And then eventually, in the best of that 7-year cycle, that Monday, the 26th, is actually a Monday, and so we get more days before Christmas. And so, as you're referencing, and others have certainly on our board and throughout the state, calendar flexibility would allow us to have a balanced schedule and align with the community college. We don't have that yet. And so this unbalanced schedule is the best we can do with the rules we have currently, recognizing, and that was a conversation with our high school principals, that we have to be very careful with our master schedule. And that's not to say that we have half of the school has easy classes the first semester, and so we have to be really careful in building that master schedule, but with that recognition. And so what I most appreciate is this is the recommendation of each of our high schools. And so certainly I appreciate being able to support their ask.
And I think it is extremely well received having the semester in for the high schools,
Definitely.
before Christmas break. So that's awesome. Is this our third year? I'm going to be doing that. Second. Okay.
Cost you a piece of candy.
Well, 1 year we got to start a week early.
Yeah.
That was the only good thing out of COVID, was we got to start the year earlier by a week. And it'll be interesting to see what other districts do, if anybody changes up their rules or,
Very well thought out for what you're given.
Yeah. I just wish we could back it up a few days.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Ms. Chadwick.
It's very
Hopefully we'll get there
frustrating.
again.
If no questions on the PK-12 calendar, we'll move over to the mass calendar. I'm going to spend a tremendous amount of time here, but basically looking at those requirements. Start date, again, those are a little bit different for them because they get to start with the community college calendar. Really, when you look at it, their main thing is the 185 days or 1,025 hours. Again, we'll definitely have those. You look at the annual vacation leave days, they had 11 in their calendar as well to match that. We talked to Mr. Johnson and we brought that back down to 10 just to make sure that we didn't put those new employees in a hard space where they couldn't take off a day. Teacher work days, a minimum of 9. They do have 10 in their calendar. Holidays, same holidays as we have, is 11. You'll see a little bit different there when you look at August the 9th. So CCPS or MAST will actually start 4 days before the community college. That gives those teachers and those students that opportunity to kind of get the going back in school, getting that routine back in place, doing some of those things, and then they start into classes. We'll also see the same thing where you look down at May. They will end May 9th, but CCPS doesn't end until May the 24th, wrapping up there. Questions on the mass calendar?
Any other questions, anybody? Any thoughts? Great job. I guess we need to approve this calendar. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the calendar as
Mr. Day has made a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I've got a second by Mr. McLean. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. It's passed unanimously.
Thank you,
Thank you
Board.
so much, Mr. McKay. You did a great job. All right, now it's Dr. Jackson's turn.
Thank you, board members, and while we're pulling up the next presentation, I will mention, Mike referenced the letters training that our elementary staff has to take next year as required by the state. There are 3 cohorts. The first cohort has been underway, and what that has meant for those teachers in those systems is that often they're having to have 3-4 hour training at the end of the workday. After teaching all day, then they have 4 hours of required training at a graduate level. And so based on the calendar you've just passed, we've spread out those teacher work days, so there's 4 across each of the quarters that line up with their work, and so we'll be able to allow our teachers to complete that state-required training during a teacher work day, during the actual work day, instead of having to do that after school. And so thank you for your support of that calendar for that reason as well. We didn't want to miss out on Ms. McClenny, who was very vocal as we were putting together the calendar to make sure we took care of our elementary teachers from the instructional standpoint. We very much appreciate her advocacy on behalf of our teachers, so thank you very much. This evening, as we do each month, I have the opportunity to, as you consider, as required by state statute, the face covering policy, again, to share with you our COVID-19 operations update and our data from the last month since we last met. Boom. Here we go. I guess I wasn't holding my mouth right. There we go. Passed the first test. Can you click the clicker? So as you know, the guiding document for the school system and for the state is the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services Strong Schools NC Public Health Toolkit. Last month I shared with you how often it's changed. Very shortly after the last board meeting, it was changed yet again. As we've gone through the year, the board has made several operational changes, in fact 5, and as I've highlighted those, I've shared with you how much I appreciate. I know Board Appreciation Month was January and today's February 1st, but I want you to know, I know that you've taken slings and arrows from the right and from the left, and from the front and from the back, and I just want to say thank you for your deliberate and considered approach to this year. We've been able to see our students in face-to-face learning as we think about, for the first time historically, our school system meeting or exceeding growth in every single school last year. One of the things that's true about our school system is that our children were in school more than most children across the state, and so I think that's a vital piece of it, because we know how important it is for our students to be in front of our teachers, and so I appreciate your commitment to doing that safely and with fidelity. And so we have had several changes. I won't go as deep into detail for those changes. I've done that each month, but the first change was following week 6, the second change following week 9, the third change where face coverings became optional in our school system when allowed was in week 11. We had a change in December 8th, week 16, where we made quite a few changes. The most recent change that I'll mention is the change that we just made, and that was on January 18th and 19th, where we looked at each of our individual schools and based on the data needed to take a pause to remote learning for 2 days, and as the data will show, we were able to, because of the board's wisdom in that moment, punch through the surge we were seeing. The graphs are very telling, and as a result of that, we've been back at school and we've seen our data improve. And so again, I think it's a demonstration of the board's willingness to do what it takes to keep our students and staff safe and to protect their health and well-being. And so I certainly want to share my appreciation as your superintendent. And so as we look at our daily student case count, this is our number of positive cases. These are school-affected cases. So the only cases we count here are students who actually walked into the building and we found out they were positive for COVID. So if it was over a long weekend or over a vacation, they never walked into the school, they wouldn't be counted as a student school-affected case. And so you'll see we were doing well, things were going off, and then we hit the surge, which really on that graph looks like a wall. The highest point there, that 64, was actually the week where we attended only one day. It was week 20. We attended on a Thursday, and then inclement weather caused a school cancellation on that Friday. But we encountered that wall across the district, and because of the 2 remote days, you'll see we were able to, as I've shared, it may not be the best choice of words, but we were able to punch through that surge. And so as I pull up, as I have each month, here are the operational changes in time where they occurred. The first 4, of course, we were pulling back on some of our protocols, and we saw that the data continued to trend down or remain the same. So clearly didn't make any sort of negative change in terms of case count. The 5th change was when we went into the 2 remote days, and we see as a result of, or it's certainly helpful in terms of punching through that surge, because following that, we were able to see the daily student case count fall way off, and so I very much appreciate that. The next set of data, and before I go to the next set of data, I put this arrow on there because I do think that it was instrumental in bringing down that student case count, which certainly impacts the number of staff members who are available. This is student cases, but the number of staff that are available and having our students actually in school. This is the weekly student case count that I've shared with you. In the blue is last year, and you'll notice that last year the highest case count we had for the entire year was 21. That was the week following Thanksgiving in the 2020-2021 school year. And you'll see that that first week of January that we were back, our case count actually went to 229. So that's the highest positive case count that we've experienced in the school system throughout the pandemic. Following the operational changes against the first 4, we see that as we were pulling back our operational protocols, we weren't seeing any sort of negative to that. In fact, in many cases, positive. And then the 5th, we came in, and after making that change, you'll see that weekly case count fell way off. Now, you'll notice that right after that, the weekly case count was 64. That was the week we were only in school one day. And so last week, which was our last full week, week 21, we were at 74, so a bit of a plateau effect there. As we look at our student and staff exclusion account, or quarantine exclusion and quarantine have been used kind of interchangeably. The blue represents our student case, our student quarantines or exclusions. The red is our staff. Again, very similar in terms of higher at the, as we were getting into the end of August, early September, then tailed way off, got really low as we were going into November. And then as we started to get into December, particularly right before the holidays, we had that uptick in week 18. Then week 19 was where we had that big, huge surge. Again, the wall, the board made the change to remote days, and we'll see that the quarantines dropped well off and have remained there. As we go forward, this is looking at the percentage of students excluded. So if we know that a student is quarantined or excluded by the school because they were a close contact in a classroom within 3 feet, or they were excluded by the health department, or a parent calls and says, my child has been quarantined, we code them in our attendance as a 1R. And so this is looking at the students who were a 1R, and this is actually a percentage, and again, you see that same, all the data points, we're seeing that same kind of trailing of our data. And so again, the first 4 operational changes. And then you'll notice that we got to, right before the board made that decision, we were at almost 25% of our students were quarantined. Of course, that's when we had that highest number of cases. And then once we made that organizational change, that 5th change, you'll see that that broke through that wall of the surge, brought it down last week, and the last 2 numbers here are actually, well, January 31st was yesterday, so as I put this together early this morning, yesterday's data, so you'll see that's continued to trail off, and yesterday we were down from that high of almost 25% of our students excluded to just at 4%, and so we look forward to that continuing to go down. This is particularly telling, particularly when we think about why in the world would we go to those 2 days of remote. We hope to never, ever have to do that again. Again, you can see the 4 changes throughout. When we look at unfilled certified substitute vacancies, let me kind of define that a little bit. So this is only for those positions where we would actually have a substitute, typically a classroom teacher, so it doesn't count bus drivers who are out. It doesn't count child nutrition workers who are out. It doesn't count folks in the office who might answer the phone who are out. It's only those folks who would have a substitute. And what this is the number of vacancies where we didn't have a substitute. And so this required the teachers in the building to cover classes, required counselors and anybody we could find to go in and cover classes. And so as we go through, you'll notice that right before we made that change, we actually had 58 unfilled certified substitute vacancies across the school system. So we were right at the point of not being able to operate our schools safely. And so again, credit to our Board of Education for being willing to take those 2 remote days, because after doing that, we see that trail right back off. And so you'll see that we've brought that number way down, and it continues to go down this week. This is the county positivity rate. Certainly there's been a lot of conversation about the county positivity rate, but it's a number we've been tracking since the start of the school year. And so this has, yesterday the health department reported a positivity rate of 29.5%. So we continue to track that. Their number, with the exception of the wall hasn't been broken through there, has tracked pretty closely with what we're seeing in the school system. This is the percentage of quarantine students testing positive. There's a question early on by board members about how many of the students that we quarantine actually wind up testing positive. And so you'll see, again, very similar to what we were seeing. We saw that hit the wrong button there, but we saw that spike up when we had the big surge as well. So we were almost to about 13% of our students who were quarantined testing positive afterwards, and that dropped down to 6.4%. Last week. And so, again, the takeaway for me is that our Board of Education has made changes to our protocols as we've gone through the school year. As a result, we've been able to keep our students in school. We've been able to keep our students and staff healthy and safe, and I very much appreciate it. Board members, be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, comments?
I know there are a lot of parents who are anxiously awaiting the day when we are going to only exclude symptomatic kids from school. And I'm kind of wondering about the horizon and what it's looking like as far as that goal. I know some of us are ready to do it more quickly than others. But what do you foresee here?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Day. The indicators that I'm receiving in terms of conversations, there's nothing that has been put in writing, but is that we're moving quicker towards that. The state is moving quicker towards that, getting to the point that ultimately what I look forward to is getting schools out of the contact tracing, quarantining, exclusion business so that we can truly focus exclusively on teaching and learning, which is our core purpose and our reason for being. And so I am hearing that the state's moving there, certainly based on the numbers we're seeing, being able to break through. I'm looking forward to that occurring certainly by the end of the school year, but as soon as possible.
Well, with all our exclusions right now, like for no contact tracing during lunch and snack and extracurricular and athletics, can we just say no more contact tracing?
I think we can say anything we want, whether the health department maintains contact tracing or not, I don't know.
I guess as of right now, that the health department is, I know they recently sent an email that said that they were going to be turning over contact tracing to a state contact tracing group. And so I was kind of curious, so the health department isn't going to be doing the contact tracing any longer if we were to say, hey, we're in the business of educating, we want to concentrate on that, and let's let the health department actually be in charge of contact tracing. So I'm kind of curious about that and what the possibilities might be if we consider that.
You're looking at me, I might suggest you talk to the health director and get your answers.
It is hard when you look, and we're at 6.4% of our quarantine students are only positive. That number is incredibly low. And I'm not taking it lightly, I'm just saying 6.4 out of our quarantine students.
Meaning 94% of the kids that are being required to go home and stay out of school are perfectly healthy, asymptomatic people. And that frustrates parents a whole lot. And I know parents have also been really, really frustrated at the lack of consistency among the way quarantines are actually happening from school to school. Some schools are operating completely differently from other schools. And we're constantly having to keep an eye on the fact that some of the guidelines that we specified we would like the schools to follow aren't necessarily being followed. And so I know that there's been some inconsistency there as well. So hopefully, I think that's something we really need to work on.
Yeah, now, I don't know that that's systematic. I think it's happened, and I don't think it's anything intentional. I just think it's happened, and I think it's been addressed. And I love one of your slides in there because it does show the very intentional steps we've taken to stay in person, to protect our students, and to try to get back to normalcy. So I like the approach that we've taken working with the health department, but I am not interested in having anybody from Raleigh tell us who we're going to quarantine or not.
Dr. Jackson, I've also had a lot of concern about consistency. Is there anything we can do immediately to mitigate this lack of consistency? And it is inconsistent, how certain schools deal with it one way and other schools deal with it, quarantines differently. Is there something we can do immediately to take care of that?
Yes, sir. We met with the principals and went through all of the operational guidelines. We meet with our nurses. One of our nurses sent out a document trying to lay out, as you know, we have a unique approach to our operational protocols in Carteret County, and so with the changes, and we appreciate all the changes, making sure that we are being as consistent as possible with an inconsistent virus can be very difficult. One of the things we deal with is that each case, each situation is incredibly unique. In one case, it may be a parent who's tested positive. In another case, it may be a student who's tested positive, but maybe the younger sibling hasn't tested positive. I did hear from two principals last week that we had students who are quarantined that wound up testing positive on day 6 and day 7, even though the CDC has recommended and DHHS recommended a 5-day quarantine. And so the disease itself is very inconsistent. And so across our 20 schools on 19 campuses, I do believe our school nurses and our principals are trying to be as consistent as possible with inconsistent circumstances. As any time that I've been made aware of by a parent or a school or a board member of perhaps an inconsistent application of the protocols, I've worked directly with the principal and the nurses to try to make sure we're being as consistent. And so I will certainly continue to double down on my efforts, and we will continue to do our best job to communicate to all of our schools the expectations of the Board of Education. But I don't want to skirt away from, this is really, really difficult work. Our nurses and principals are getting beat up. When we made some changes that the others would communicate with parents, then our staff was still getting beat up because our staff was having to say you have to call somebody else. And so we need to do a better job. We always want to improve. It's kind of the quote that Ms. McClenny had, that excellence is not an accident, it takes consistent, hard work, focused work, and we'll continue to do that. And so to answer your question, yes, there is something that we can do, and that is continue to do our best and do better. And so we will do that.
I think that, I was more thinking that on our end, I hope that we are presenting a systematically consistent message to our schools so that they do have some kind of path that they understand, the path they need to follow.
Yes, sir.
And you're right, it's a tough time. I'm sitting here tonight, I sort of lean towards the way Bubba feels. I hate to give up any kind of control and just let the state of North Carolina have their hands 100% on it, just because I don't know that the state has handled this as well as we have. I don't know. That might be presumptuous of me to say, and I don't know that I'm nearly as smart as the state of North Carolina, but I got some common sense. And that's sort of how I feel at this point, that, I would hate to just give it all to the state and let them do what they would want to do.
I agree. I share the same fears. I think every decision we've made slowly and knew if we needed to, we could step back, just like we did the virtual days. But if we hand it over and say we're out of the business, then we have to hand it over and be out of the business. I don't know what the ramifications will be, but I sure don't want it to be the state taking over our schools either.
And Dr. Jackson, I want to thank you personally very much, and a lot of our staff, but I know you in particular I've worked with, and you've done an outstanding job trying to address parent concerns when there have been some frustrations and so forth, and you've worked, like you said, directly with the principals, and you've done an awesome job, so I really, really appreciate that, and I know that the parents do as well. So there'll be some tweaking and some things I know we still need to address, and I know just recently there's been a couple of frustrations from a couple different parents about things here and there that I very much like to kind of us get ironed out, be it not being able to have proof of a positive COVID test, for example, that's one of the exclusions right now is a positive COVID test that, if you've had COVID, you can be excluded just like the vaccinated kids and all, and have parents having to try to prove that maybe they didn't have a chance to get a test, or the tests weren't available, or the doctor told them not to go. Anyway, you're familiar with the case, but that sort of stuff, I'm tempted to want to do a little tweak to say, look, we need to be a little bit more, give a little bit more grace and be a little bit more lenient and try to focus a little bit more on keeping the kids in school. Sometimes I know there's a big push to want to be safe, but I want us to concentrate a little bit more on let's focus on trying to, when this could go either way, let's try to keep our kids in school. And sometimes I don't feel like there's enough grace there, not giving the parent the benefit of the doubt. If they've said, look, my kid just had COVID, why am I being excluded from school? Here, they just, and anyway, that gets really, really frustrating. So I'd love to see us not have to, parents, not have to provide a, proof of positive COVID test if they're, to avoid a quarantine the next time.
And I think while we're pointing out staff, Mr. Blair Probst, we've got a ton of nurses working with all these students, but we've got one person working with 1,100 staff members, and I have no idea how he's done that for 2 years, because that's not his full-time job. He's still got a whole position that he's holding down in addition, so.
He's got two full-time jobs right now.
At least.
Kudos to you, Blair.
With inconsistency, it is hard for me to keep up with the changes. There have been hoot after hoot, and I'll be honest, sometimes I'm like, what are the rules anymore? And I don't know. And we have had to change and change and change. And so if there are inconsistencies, I think it's just everyone's having a hard time keeping up. We just have had so much going on and changes over and over and over again. So I do want to acknowledge that, and that I don't think anyone's being intentional or making up rules. So
Thank you.
And Dr. Jackson, would we need to, some of these little tweaks that we want to make as far as fixing some of the inconsistencies and trying to fix some frustrations about can't produce a positive COVID test or blah, 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 whatever, are those things that we can work with you directly on, or is that something that we actually have to make a motion right now and pass something right now to try to remedy?
I think that's a motion. I mean, I think that's based on what the governor has mandated. I think we're voting on that every month. Is that, I didn't mean to jump in front of you.
Yes, sir. Yes, so, thank you, Mr. McLean. So if the board wants to change our protocols, I do believe, and certainly council may want to weigh in, but I do believe the board would need to vote on that and share with the staff what you'd like us to do, and as we have, we'll make that happen.
Is that accurate, Neil? Are we voting on changes?
Well, if the superintendent asks you to do that, then you should do that. But things like managing inconsistencies between schools, the superintendent can do that. But if you're going to, as you go away from what the health department says they want you to do, it is better for the board to do that.
So, for example, is something that, would it be worth considering? I'd like to hear conversation, something like, hey, should we not require proof of positive COVID test in these situations where, a kid has had COVID, they've actually been told by their doctor, don't come in, and the at-home tests, we got some frustration with at-home tests not counting. Sometimes they can count in certain situations and not in others. And anyway, is that something to consider? Not requiring proof of positive COVID test?
My thought is if you've been out with the 1R prior to then being excluded, why wouldn't those 1Rs in your history count as you've had COVID, whether you had a test or not?
Because the 1Rs can be just an exclusion, right? They could be home, and it'd be those 94% that are home and healthy.
Right. Well.
So it wouldn't work to say that. I love the idea of trusting parents saying they have a positive case, but we've also seen when we had the option to go back and forth with virtual, parents taking vacations with their virtual days. So it does worry me a little bit that we will have some, and there's no way to avoid it, some that take advantage of the situation. And that would definitely be a fear, is getting, parents are.
But this is, you're trying to keep your kid in school. You're not trying to take a vacation.
Correct.
And yeah, that's what's been frustrating parents. Parents are feeling like they're thwarted trying to keep their kids in school. Here we have 94+% of the kids are not getting, the quarantine kids are at home perfectly healthy, and that's.
Right, and then they're getting sent home again.
Again and again, and it's extremely frustrating. I want to take every step I can to try to help keep the healthy, asymptomatic kids in school. And I would love that same attitude to be shared across the board, but I know there's different priorities and people look at stuff different ways. That's just the way I.
Well, and it's incredibly hard on our staff. They're chasing down, like you said, these healthy children and over and over and over again, and it's taking up all of their time. They're not allowed to be there and be administrators or teachers or TAs or the things that we're supposed to be there for. They're spending the majority of their days, am I wrong? You are spending the majority of your days
coping.
Yeah.
Way too much time on COVID management and not as much time as we would all love to be spending on actually educating. That's unfortunate.
All right, any other thoughts, ideas, or questions? Anybody have a motion they would like to make?
I'll make an easy one, and then they can amend it or whatever you want to do. I move to continue to make face coverings optional.
Is that it?
That's it. That's all I'm saying.
There you go.
But you can substitute, you can amend it.
I guess I've got to get a second, and then we can have discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a motion by Reverend Goodwin. Do I have a second?
One second.
A second by Ms. Wheatley. Any discussion on this? No discussion?
Well, I'll have one discussion. We're all frustrated. Every single one of them. When we made mask coverings optional, it was wonderful to go by a school and see kids out in the playground without masks. that just brought joy to everybody's heart. It is, the contact tracing is frustrating. I mean, I don't think any of us agree, or have any disagreement on that. The only place I come out with is I don't want somebody else telling us, like, either a health department or the state, how to run our schools. So how far can we take it safely and still, I mean, we've stretched it, and I'm in favor of it. How far can we take it and still be able to run our own schools? I don't know the answer to that question. Does that make sense?
I don't think it's a lack of discussion that we all have an opinion on it, and I think we all have the same goal, is to have all of our kids in school. I think it's truly one time where we just don't really know how to legally and within some kind of guidelines, without handing it over to the state, get to this end goal. And it's frustrating because I think we've all, just like the schools, this is all we've done for a long time.
I really appreciate you saying that, because every single one of us are on the same page as far as keeping our kids in school, period. We're just all trying to figure out the balance of, do we really push back and potentially break something, or do we kind of ease into it like we've been doing? So I do recognize, and I really appreciate all the work that everybody has put into this. And it's a difficult situation, but I do want to say that we are on the same page as far as keeping our kids in school unanimously.
So maybe one day we'll all live long enough that if you're sick, you stay home. If not, you come to school.
That's a partnership.
That would be great, to go back to those days.
It would be great.
I don't know that happened PC prior to COVID, but anyway, it is. It's. I can't believe 2 years later we're even still talking about it. It's frustrating, but as much as we're frustrated, Blair and Jody and Richie and Karen and everybody out there, and Jessica, Terry, Amy, I mean, everybody, Corey, Alice and Rob, everybody gets to deal with it. Jennifer, Mike.
Good night, John Boy.
Cheryl, don't forget Cheryl.
Cheryl. I mean, y'all live with it every single day, all day long. We'll come in here and make a decision in a meeting, and then you have to live with it. And so we recognize, and I hope that the community recognize what you've been through the past 2 years. It is brutal. And you do it because you love the kids. You do it because you're really, really good at it, based on Jody's presentation. So thank you, and hopefully we're getting near the end.
All right, I've got a first and a second, and I'm getting ready to call for a vote, and now is the time to say anything else before I call for a vote. Okay, we've got first and second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Very good. Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
He brought that to a close, didn't he? I invited an amendment.
All right, now is Mr. Richie Paler will give us an update on bond and capital project.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening, Rich.
My report's pretty short for you, so. First report on capital projects. Last month I told you we had paint finally, so we are continuing to paint at Carteret High School and Moorhead Elementary School. A lot of that work now is outside work, so some of it is weather dependent. We finally secured quotes on our playground equipment, so we're in the process of ordering playground equipment for 5 of our elementary schools, and that would be Beaufort L, Bogue Sound, Harkers Island, Moorhead Primary, and Newport Elementary School are all getting new playground equipment. As far as the bond projects go, White Oak Elementary School is the next plan to go out for bid, and at this time, we're just waiting on the state Department of, the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, to issue us a stormwater permit. So that's what we're waiting on for that to go out to bid. First, do you have any questions on those? Okay, last, I'd like to introduce Tom Owens, he's our new construction manager, so I know you've seen his name, so here's the face, you can put a name with a face, and we're excited to have him on board. He brings a ton of experience in commercial construction, so we're excited to have him and be working with him. So, any questions?
I've got a whole list for Tom.
I'll shoot you his phone number and you can contact him directly.
Please do. I think I have it, but please do. But yeah, glad you're here. You came in at an interesting time, so got big shoes to fill too. Keith did a great job, but you come highly recommended, so.
Thank you, Richie. Thank you, Tom.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, now we've got some exciting stuff. We are going to consider a nomination for the 2022 North Carolina School Board Association Legislative Committee Service. And we've got Brittany who is going to read.
Mr. Chair, I move to nominate Board Member Catherine Chadwick to serve on the 2022 NCSBA Legislative Committee.
It's a setup.
We have a
Which I've had
motion.
no conversation with about.
I did ask.
We've got a motion by Ms. Whaley. Do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a second by Reverend Goodwin. All in favor, raise your right hand. Catherine did not vote for it. One opposed, please put that down for the record. Very good, Catherine. You will serve us well, and we're excited that you're doing this.
Thank you.
We will now receive some comments from Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, and good evening again, board members. Under North Carolina Session Law 2019-222, superintendents are required to report to the local Board of Education the total number of school mental health support personnel no later than February 15th of each year. For the current school year, the school system currently has 7.5 school psychologists. This is 0.5 less positions than last year's one employee requested to move to half-time. There are currently 2 vacancies for school psychologists, which will increase the total over last year after those positions are filled. The EC department's advertising locally and nationally to fill these positions. The school system additionally contracts for 8 hours a week for a school psychologist on a contract service. For the current school year, the school system currently has 27.8 school counselors. This is an increase of 1.1 positions over last year. Also, for the current school year, the school system currently has 4 school social workers. This is the same number of positions as last year. In addition, the school system contracts for 1 more school social worker. For the current school year, the school system currently employs 8.85 school nurses. This is a slight decrease of 0.11 for a part-time position over last year. In addition, the school system contracts for an additional 10 school nurses, and 5 additional nurses work one-on-one with EC students. As I move along, we received profoundly exciting EVOS data that was reported to you this evening. Every single school met or exceeded growth expectations. I cannot express enough my profound appreciation for the men and women who serve in our school system. They give deeply of themselves. They focus on children instead of challenges. The word may be overused, but it is not an overstatement to say that our team members are absolute heroes. I also want to commend the parents, guardians, loved ones, and community members who stepped forward last year to support our students during remote and hybrid learning. We are absolutely blessed to have a strong partnership with the families we serve. I want to congratulate each of the schools in our school system for being recognized by U.S. News and World Report as a best school. Each of the schools that were eligible to be ranked earned this prestigious designation based on a number of performance-based factors. We appreciate this national recognition of our schools across the school system. I'm pleased to share with you, brand new, just received this afternoon, that Carteret County Public Schools once again leads all other school systems for the number of students who auditioned and were selected for the Eastern All-District Band. We are pleased to announce that we had 115 band students selected for the All-District Band. The Eastern District comprises all schools located east of Interstate 95. In addition, our school system had 12 students who were selected for the All-Region Jazz Band. Today, this evening, we welcome a unique presence to our board meeting. That cute little penguin over there, we had the great pleasure today, this Carteret County Public Schools Education Foundation received a check for $10,400 from the Penguin Plunge event, specifically for the Big Rock Teaching Fellows Program. The scholarship applications, I'm proud to announce, for this program have gone out to our high schools, and we're encouraging students who may want to consider teaching in their future to apply for that scholarship, and we look forward to them becoming teachers in our school system. In this month of February, we will celebrate Black History, National Children's Dental Health, and Career and Technical Education Month. I certainly want to thank Mrs. Dees for the presentation of our CTE program. You may know our state superintendent has talked about this is the year of workforce development. I had the opportunity to attend all of those summer camps and see our teachers working one-on-one with our middle school and high school students through the summer. It was absolutely breathtaking. You also heard about the internships we have across the county. We certainly appreciate all the business partners who have stepped forward. Particularly notable was the Spark program we've just started with the hospital, and we look forward to helping to meet the needs for health safety employees across our county. Next week is National School Counseling and School Bus Driver Appreciation Week. We cannot say thank you enough to our counselors and particularly our school bus drivers. The following 2 weeks after that, we celebrate National Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America Week, National Future Farmers of America, FFA Week, and National Public Schools Weeks. Art from the Heart County Art Show starts February 11th through the 25th in the old Kmart building. We look forward to celebrating our visual student artists. We certainly don't want to forget our loved ones on Monday, February 14th for Valentine's Day. A bit of a longer report than typical, but we have incredible things happening in our school system. And as I shared earlier, I very much appreciate the leadership of this Board of Education. We have been, we are, and we will remain Carteret strong. Mr. Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. That was excellent, as always. Any board member comments, thoughts? Nothing? All right, I guess this ends with me, as it always does. I think that I hope that as we walk out of here tonight, we realize how blessed we are to live in the county we live in and have the school system we do. You know, I don't even know how to put this in words, but I see division, and it breaks my heart. I don't know if it's because the newspaper writes headlines that divides us, I don't know. But I hope that as we go out into the night, that we take what we've heard here and learned here today, the things that our teachers are doing, our administrators and our students, and we use that to build bridges, because that's what we need to do. We need to build bridges with each other and quit arguing about COVID and whatnot. We need to work together as a county, because this is a great county. So with that said, thank y'all for coming, and I think we need a motion to go into closed session.
I move to enter into closed session to consider confidential personnel matter pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A6 and attorney-client communications pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3.
Good job. I've got a motion by Reverend Goodwin, a second by Mr. McLean. All in favor? Again, we're in closed session. Thank y'all.